So how do they create this illusion that what happened last month, as terrible as it was one of the worst things that ever happened? They got to lie. They got to lie a lot. They got to exaggerate, and they got to make stuff up. We all lived through the summer. We all saw the riots. Somehow, what happened on the 6th of January was worse than everything that happened over the summer. Actually, everything that happened over the summer was good in their book. All right, so let's go to the impeachment. I mentioned, what do they do to further this narrative? They've got to lie. They've got to exaggerate, and they got to make stuff up. Let's start with the lie. They've told a lot of them, but this one is a real doozy. And somehow they think that we don't have access to the internet. Jamie Raskin, member of Congress, Democrat from Maryland, and he has been milking this opportunity. I don't think he's being sincere. Maybe he is, but I know he's being dishonest.
I'm not even saying we're non-violent. I'm saying that we didn't aggress. We did not initiate force against anybody. We're not non-violent. We'll kill these people if we have to.
Well, I do think there's blame. Yes, I think there's blame on both sides. You look at both sides. I think there's blame on both sides. And you also had people that were very fine people on both sides.
So just in case you didn't catch all of that, the president praised a Republican candidate who assaulted a journalist as my kind of guy. He said there were, quote, very fine people on both sides when the neo-Nazis, the Klansmen, and Proud Boys invaded the city, the great city of Charlottesville, and killed Heather Heyer.
All right. You've been watching this show long enough. You know that's a lie right there. The president was not talking about neo-Nazis. They showed a clip. They've been showing all these clips, edited selectively for their advantage and benefit. Here's what the president said. He made it so clear who he was talking about and who he wasn't talking about.
And you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally.
I mean, where is the censure for this kind of conduct that we're seeing from Raskin and the other House managers? They are lying. They are making stuff up, and it's happening in real time. And by the way, if anyone's inciting anybody, it's those guys right now, the House managers. All right, back to exaggerating and throwing everything in the kitchen sink at Donald Trump. How about this? This is not just about the riot. This is about COVID outbreaks.
Since January 6th, at least 7 members who hid with other members of Congress have tested positive for COVID-19. At least 38 Capitol Police officers have either tested positive or been exposed. And nearly 200 National Guard troops who were deployed to our nation's capital to provide all of us protection have tested positive.
You see, if only President Trump had not told those people to march peacefully and patriotically, we wouldn't have 200 COVID cases. Oh, and the troops got COVID. Ah, what a tyrant, huh? You see this? You see everything in the kitchen sink? And then it's just good old dramatic exaggeration. This is Joaquin Castro trying to make the most of his big moment.
To fail to convict a president of the United States who incited a deadly insurrection, who acted in concert with a violent mob, who interfered with the certification of the Electoral College votes, who abdicated his duty as commander-in-chief, would be to forfeit the power of our example as a North Star on freedom, democracy, human rights, and most of all, on the rule of law.
Stakes are really high. If you don't vote to convict, we forfeit our North Star status. President Trump abdicated his duty as commander-in-chief. All right, you see what I mean? Over the top. We saw what happened. We saw what he said, and we see that these comments over the top. Too much, too much. So what's going on here? Oh, there is a racial component. Have you noticed? Let's talk about this, all right? It's clear to me that there is a racial component because right now in America, who doesn't have much status? White folk, especially poor white folk, especially poor white people who stormed the Capitol. They should not have done it, and I think the rioters should be prosecuted. Not all of them, though. Some of them were let inside. We saw that. Some of them just happened to be there. But now we're looking at their movements, tracking them. Did you see the video outside of Nancy Pelosi's office? This is evidence, and it should be looked into, and those responsible should be punished. But why so selective? Why is this like 9/11? What about when they took over that police precinct in Minneapolis? Anybody remember that? I mean, they took over a police precinct. Guess what? They went inside, they trashed the place, the cops had to evacuate. The cops actually had to evacuate, and this was considered a beautiful thing somehow. This was a moment. Now, why is that? The difference? Trying to, I don't know, actually. Something political is going on. I know this, the next day, Joe Biden did not condemn the violence. He talked about dirty cops. He did not condemn the violence. What's he thinking? What was he thinking? He was thinking about Election Day and the run-up to election, right? Why was it so hard for them to condemn what we all saw back then? The looting, over-the-top looting. This was, I saw one person say, they're just blowing off steam. What about in my neighborhood? Violence in the streets. Again, the mayor of this city sanctioned all of this, told the cops to back off. The cops were the enemy. It's crazy, isn't it? It's totally crazy. But remember, not that crazy, because we are a systemically racist country. We deserve these problems. Isn't that right, Democrat media establishment?
The battle to achieve racial justice and root out systemic racism in this country.
There is systemic racism that must be weeded out.
We're going to finally root out systemic racism in this country.
We do absolutely have systemic racism.
We must end systemic racism in this country.
All right, a couple of things. Granted, yes, I am Caucasian. Granted, though, I'm also feeling the sting, being judged for something I can't control. My race, my ethnicity, my gender, my orientation. We're now being judged for those things. You shouldn't judge anybody for things you can't control. But when did we suddenly become a systemically racist society? I heard talk about that in the 60s. Joe Biden, look it up. Look up his concerns about systemic racism. He started talking about it in 2017, 2018, a few months ago. This was his key to power. You know, I thought it was a beautiful moment, actually, when this country elected Barack Obama. Yeah, I fell for it. Gave that great big speech in 2004. He spoke rather candidly about problems in the African-American community. Yeah, he could do it. He's black, well-educated. He could take on problems in that community that we all know about. He was able to do it. But he stopped doing it because a lot of people on the left, they didn't dig it when he said things like, let's graduate from high school. Let's not stigmatize black kids when they read a book. You know who would say those things? In addition to Barack Obama for a little while, some of the finest men in America, including the late, great Herman Cain, got Sheriff Clark, Ben Shapiro, Dr. Carson. They were not afraid to talk about these issues. And a lot of people are right now. Who knows what can happen when you have an honest conversation about race, and not the silly one they want us to have, the silly conversation that they can control and they can exploit.
You just watched Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news channel, now in more than 70 million homes. You can get Newsmax TV on your cable system or check your cable guide. And if your system doesn't carry Newsmax, call them, tell them you want Newsmax TV, because we're real news for real people.